Let's see. Is it on now? Okay. Thank you very much. And don't. You're certainly not an old fogey. You're very intimidating as a moderator here on our timing. Thank you. It's my pleasure to be a part of this panel, and I appreciate the opportunity to be a part of the Seoul Defense Dialogue. Let me begin. Do we have a presentation? Oh, there we go. Let me begin by explaining why I think disaster relief is important, and then I will highlight how complicated this activity can be, along with some important past lessons relevant to today's topic. And then I will outline the current training framework that we have in the Asia-Pacific region, which is a very valuable function, but needs to become more efficient and integrated. Before I do all this, let me preface my remarks to note that I will focus on disaster relief, or the DR in HADR, rather than humanitarian assistance. I think that is the most relevant to defense cooperation. First, on disaster relief. There is a need to be filled here. Millions are affected and thousands die each year from large-scale natural disasters, and the majority of the impact is here in Asia. Here is data from a 38-year record of record keeping, and for 2012, there were 120 occurrences in Asia, affecting 72 million people, killing over 6,000 and inflicting $3 billion worth of damage. $33 billion worth of damage. The military can play a very unique and critical support role to help people maintain stability and in certain circumstances of these large-scale disasters. I believe there is also an opportunity. Asia is a very dynamic region with a significant intra-regional trade and interaction, but there is also a history of rivalry and mistrust. It reminds me of the history of the Mediterranean, which became increasingly interconnected as sea travel brought them closer together, but they alternated between periods of cooperation and periods and prosperity, as well as periods of conflict and destruction. For our own collective benefit, we need to do whatever we can to foster cooperation, a spirit of collective destiny, trust, communication, and interoperability. Disaster relief cooperation is the best way to bring together one of the most secretive and suspicion-inducing organizations in our nations. It is an opportunity to build capacity and confidence in each other. A true watershed in this field was the global response to the Indian Ocean tsunami of 2004. 35 countries contributed military assets and deployed more than 30,000 personnel to disaster-affected areas. It was a multifaceted response involving government civilian agencies, private sector, NGOs, international organizations, and national militaries. Quick logistical support and surveillance assessment are vital functions that the military can provide, always at the invitation of the affected country and always in support of the civilian authorities. In the Indian Ocean tsunami response, the U.S. military alone, for example, deployed 15,000 personnel, flew 1,800 sorties from the USS Abraham Lincoln, and delivered 24 million pounds of relief supplies. Many other countries, including Korea, Japan, Australia, contributed significant resources. Aid agencies and foreign ministries are the primary coordinators for each nation's response in collaboration with the affected country and the UN system. And private sector contributions, I think, should also not be overlooked. The main point is that each country has a wide range of financial, logistical, and technical capabilities to offer, but it must be deployed efficiently, which requires training at the national, bilateral, and multilateral levels. We are getting better at this, as I think the multilateral relief effort in the Philippines last year showed, although continued training and improvement is required. Now the Ebola crisis in West Africa is forcing us to respond to a very different type of natural disaster, where military logistical support is still quite valuable, albeit in a very different way. Thematically, I think it's important to recognize that we have at least 4 different categories of actors and capabilities: government, civilian, military, NGO and international organizations, and the private sector. Maintaining good communication and interoperability among all 4 is a constant requirement. The military capability is particularly impressive, but we should resist the urge to use it too quickly. It's very expensive, it can complicate operations, and it can be politically sensitive. For example, in the United States, the Defense Department maintains in Atlanta, Georgia, a warehouse with over 400,000 humanitarian daily rations ready to go at a moment's notice. But if food can be resourced closer to the scene of a disaster or locally, that's better for the local economy and to help build capacity in the region. So a priority for our cooperation should be to help build capacity in the countries in Asia likely to be affected by disasters, since the initial resilience of those host nations and its ability to assess and coordinate a response is most important in the first few days. It may also be the case that the military is not the most efficient tool, either due to information sharing, classification challenges, or the fact that its primary training is for other tasks. For example, medical staff are not trained as much in the kinds of injuries in a natural disaster where they are training primarily for combat injuries instead of community medicine. Also, each crisis is different and has different phases. The flexibility is particularly important. In the Pakistan earthquake response of 2005, for example, helicopters that could operate at high altitudes were particularly important. And some of those, from that experience, the United States continued to invest in that capability with a $3 billion purchase of CH-53 Sikorsky helicopters for the Marines. But the tsunami disasters that we've seen require more of a Navy sea basing type concept, so different capabilities for different challenges. We cannot expect every country to be prepared with all types of capabilities. So this is why the cooperation helps us apply the right capabilities to each situation. Early involvement of the military or certain government agencies will give way to other responders later on. I think the military response is in the very early stage, and a transition needs to be thought of, an exit strategy for the military as soon as possible. Beyond the physical platform, well-integrated supply chain management skills are critical, so involving professionals with those types of skills with the military can be particularly useful. All militaries need to continue to work on interoperability among services and among nations, not only to improve effectiveness of the response, but it also improves other forms of security cooperation. In the Pakistan earthquake, for example, the U.S. began to realize in more detail that their communication systems or their software systems for the military were not as compatible with the aid agencies, the Falcon View system versus the ArcView. We've learned that the ability to deploy a wide area network in a disaster area can be an extremely useful tool for sharing information among different participants. So that's something we can consider. Now, in recent years, we've seen significant growth of disaster relief training opportunities in Asia, due largely to a marriage of convenience, which is that national and regional disaster relief organizations are very interested to get the military involved because of the capabilities and the resources they bring. Meanwhile, military and defense policy officials are anxious to use disaster relief as a means to increase security cooperation. This explosion of training opportunities is both a blessing and a curse. Never has there been a more vibrant and constructive infrastructure for promoting cooperation of this regard. But it can overwhelm and make it hard to maintain continuity and a high quality of programming in this field. So we need to think about rationalizing this activity and truly capturing the lessons, the most important lessons from each experience. We have many different forums in the region to promote this. A few are listed here. Let me move on to the next stage. So here's an outline of many of the different forums and the major disaster relief exercises and resources that they are providing. For example, building on the emerging infrastructure, the United States used its membership in the ASEAN Regional Forum to help establish a major new field exercise in 2009, co-sponsored with the Philippines. This concept was to carry out a civilian-led, military-supported HADR demonstration involving multiple countries, and in the process deliver real assistance to one of the local communities that was hosting it. 26 countries from around the world, from around the region participated. 14 contributed assets, including 500 civilians. This became the DREX exercise platform. Follow-on iterations involved Japan and Indonesia co-leading in 2011, and then last year Korea and Thailand stepped up, now involving over 4,000 participants. Despite the growth and action-oriented nature of DREX, the rest of ASEAN Regional Forum has had difficulty following this model as a way to promote other kinds of security cooperation. And in part to deal with this, the ASEAN Defense Ministerial Meeting Plus, or ADMM Plus, was created and stimulated the creation of certain working groups to foster this type of cooperation. And not surprisingly, the HADR and military medicine working groups are the most advanced in terms of carrying out actual exercises together, doing so in a combined event in June of 2013. This was held back-to-back with an ASEAN-only event, the second ASEAN Military's HADR exercise known as AHX, and there is another ASEAN-led activity in Regional Disaster Emergency Response Simulation Exercise, or RDEX, which simulates major natural disaster in the region and tests a coordinated response. All of this is in addition to DREX, and they all involve hundreds, at times thousands of people, and can take up to 2 years to plan. I think this challenge is exacerbated by the increased number of regional military exercises that are now including HADR components in them. Cobra Gold, Balikatan with the United States and the Philippines, and even Rim of the Pacific, or RIMPAC, which is a major multilateral exercise. I think in order to wrap up and stay within time, I'll focus on a few final recommendations and observations. The Multilateral Planning Augmentation Team, or MPAT, that was started in the region, headquartered at Pacific Command, over the last decade or so has developed a number of standard operating procedures in these types of disaster relief situations. And that has been extremely helpful in facilitating a more coordinated response. I think it's time to begin thinking about building on the standard operating procedure approach by developing legal agreements or at least guidelines to facilitate rapid deployment and access of different militaries to assist, equipment sharing, information sharing protocols. We've been beginning to work on troubleshooting the data linkage challenges that we face in one of the exercises, Pacific Endeavor. All of this is a way to build and retain, building and retaining this disaster relief infrastructure. I also think might benefit from a more focused approach in terms of the regional framework. The ADMM Plus shows a lot of promise in this regard. And so finally, some of the list of recommendations, I think developing a multi-year strategic exercise plan for disaster relief in the region could be a high priority. This is something that the United States, Australia, Malaysia, a couple of other countries are working at proposing that would begin to integrate this collective activity that's going on. We don't necessarily need to eliminate some of this activity, but it just needs to build on itself with attainable goals over a period of time that we can work towards. And I think focusing on the core competencies and interoperability is the place to focus, reconnaissance, information sharing, logistics. Always remember the importance of the affected country, their ability, their capacity, and also in a whole-of-government way, because when the affected country is hit, it's not just their military, or it's all of their internal bureaucracies need to figure out a way to work with all these incoming militaries. I also think minilateral networks, like trilateral initiatives, can be a way to help operationalize broader multilateral initiatives. And staying focused on early entry and early exit, I think, is key. Overall, we need a commitment to continuous improvement in this area, and I think that will help us respond to the need and to the opportunity. Thank you very much.